real stories, raw truth. This is Whiskey and War Stories.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Whiskey and War Stories, the podcast where we sit down with those who've lived through the unspoken battles, on the front lines, behind the badge, and deep within themselves. This is where raw truth meets quiet resilience, and where every story is poured straight, no chaser. Whether it's combat trauma, the weight of the job, scars that don't show up on paper, or the strength that doesn't make the headlines, we're here to talk about it. No filters, no fluff, just real people, real pain, and strength, and the strength it takes to keep it going. So pour yourself something strong, settle in, and let's get it going. And if you believe these stories matter, help us keep the conversation going. Like, follow, subscribe on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. Your support really helps us reach the people who need it most. So here we are, season 3, episode 3. What's up, Ryan? How are you?
Hey, man. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, brother. How's it going, man? Your audio cut out a little bit. Can you hear me? Your audio cut out. I got you back on.
We're good?
Yeah, you're good, brother.
Sorry about that.
No, welcome, brother. Welcome. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, happy Sunday. Very excited about today's guest. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a good one. As is customary, every episode is dedicated to fallen hero. I have the honors of doing this week's dedication to the fallen hero. So it's actually going to be fallen heroes on this particular episode. And because recently there was 3 deputies that were killed in a tragic accident, and just wouldn't do us justice just to talk about one of them. So this episode will be dedicated to all 3, and I'll give you just a short bio of these 3. So it's Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department's detectives. They worked with their bomb squad, their explosive ordnance disposal unit, that's attached to their Special Enforcement Bureau, their SEB. And this is Detective William Osborne, Detective Victor Lemus, and Detective Joshua Kelly Eklund. Their end of watch was Friday, July 18th of this year. Detectives Osborne, Lemus, and Eklund were killed in an explosion at the Vasquez Center Training Academy at 1060 Northeastern Street in Los Angeles around 7:30 a.m. on that date. Detective Osborne has been with the Sheriff's Department for 33 years, assigned to the Special Enforcement Bureau. He's survived by his wife, 4 sons, and 2 daughters. Detective Lemus has been with the department for 22 years, also assigned to the Special Enforcement Bureau, survived by his wife, 3 daughters, 3 sisters, who also serve at the LA County Sheriff's Department, and 4 brothers. And Detective Eklund, been with the department for 19 years. He's survived by his wife and 7 children. So to the 3 detectives that passed away in the tragic accident, we dedicate the episode to you, and may you rest in peace. Cheers.
Rest in peace. It's horrible.
Rest in peace. Cheers, yeah.
Yeah, you talk about just a horrific tragedy, man. How long that department has been around, and for so many people to go at once, just horrendous. So, thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, it's my understanding that this is the most they've lost of life for a sworn officer since, it's been like a century or something. It's been a long time.
That's horrendous. Horrible day.
Yeah, very horrible. Rest in peace, brothers. And as is also customary, each episode is going to be dedicated, or we choose a different bottle every episode. So I also have the honors for the whiskey for this episode, and it's Beer Creek Distillery straight bourbon whiskey, handcrafted in Colorado. Maybe the label's kind of sideways there. So I'll read you what it has here in the bottle. Small batch Colorado bourbon, distilled, matured, and bottled by Beer Creek Distillery, South Tacoma Street, Denver, Colorado. So not really much of a story there. It's 90 proof. An alcohol by volume. 90 proof, so it's definitely a smooth whiskey.
How's it taste?
Pretty good. I actually have like a little bit of like floral notes in the beginning. It's got no bite. It's got no bite aftertaste. A little bit of caramely taste in there. Excellent whiskey though.
I got a question for you.
Yeah, hit me.
Has there ever been a whiskey you've not liked on the show? And have you been honest about it?
Gosh.
It's like,
I don't think we haven't bashed
Guy Fieri.
Yeah, so we haven't bashed the whiskey, but some have been like really. We're like, whoa, that's woo. It's like
that's like all those cooking shows. Like they can't really like.
Yeah, they can't really like everything they make. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I'm just curious.
No, this one's pretty good. It's pretty good.
All right.
Okay, Ryan. Without further ado, you want to introduce our special guest today?
I'd be honored to. So I'll start off by reading a bio, and then I'll kind of introduce Danny a little bit on my own. But so Dan Kono is a retired detective with us at the Pomona Police Department. He's got approximately 49 years of law enforcement experience, which includes 15 years with the LAPD as a use of force analyst, over 30 years with the Pomona Police Department, and 4 years as a USAF security police, which is currently called the Security Forces. A military working dog handler. His experience also includes 20 years as an intermittent medical legal investigator with a federal mass fatality disaster unit similar to a federal coroner's office. For his police experience, that includes 5 years in patrol at Pomona, 7 years at the Major Crimes Task Force, 2 tours, which is our gang unit, which Jaime has a lot of experience on. And kind of where Danny cut his teeth is 18 years as a detective. His detective assignments include 2 years in domestic violence and 16 years in homicide. That alone caused a lot of good and bad memories, I could imagine, which we will talk about. While assigned to homicide, he conducted several hundreds of death investigations, which include approximately 200 homicides and 100 cold cases. High-profile death investigations include the death of Elridge Cleaver, co-founder of the radical 60s organization, the Black Panthers. Other high-profile homicides he's investigated is the 1994 murder of the fiancé of a Los Angeles Rams player during a bank robbery, and something that hits near and dear to all of us at Pomona PD, and something that we'll dive into here, the 1996 on-duty murder of Pomona police officer Daniel T. Fraembs, and the 2004 on-duty murder of CHP trooper Thomas Steiner, who was killed in Pomona coming out of our courthouse. Additionally, he's been married to the same wonderful woman for 43 years. He has 4 adult children, 8 beautiful grandchildren, and as Dan says, and we wanted to ask about this, he's a hell of a dancer, which is a awesome mental picture. I can't wait to talk about that.
All right, without further ado, Dan Kono, the man of the hour. Welcome, brother.
Thanks, fellas. I appreciate it.
That's a hell of an introduction. That's very wow, very experienced. Yeah, couldn't have someone more experienced and a better human being come on the podcast than you, Dan. Yeah, we're grateful to have you on. Yeah, welcome.
Welcome. Before we turn it over to Dan, I just kind of want to give my take on Dan when I first started Pomona PD. Dan was really that old school detective that I kind of looked up to, and he worked with a lot of great detectives I remember back in those days, but just very relentless, driven, assertive, a go-getter. Dan and his partner even wore a fedora hat, brought back that old school professionalism to the job. He is that guy that you would want investigating your own homicide if you passed away, or unfortunately if one of your families was a victim of a crime, you'd want Dan Kono. So with that, thank you very much, Dan, for being here.
Appreciate the kind words.
Yeah. And I stumbled upon a picture of a handsome homicide detective.
Oh my goodness. Who is that?
I don't know. It looks like Harold Murphy to me.
It actually does. Another legend, Harold Murphy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I know we talked kind of behind the scenes before we recorded, and I think this is your first podcast in this kind of realm, PTSD, mental health kind of stuff. So, I appreciate you coming on, and really looking forward to having just a good conversation with you. To start out, can you kind of share a little about your journey? I know you had a military background. Like, what led you into law enforcement? And once in law enforcement, how'd you end up into homicide? And was that a thing that you wanted to do? And kind of how it springboarded your career from there?
Well, it's kind of funny because my journey, you wouldn't know it to look at me now. I'm looking at my picture in there, and I almost look like Colonel Sanders. But
look at me now, Donnie.
Yeah, look at me now.
LAPD colors.
It took a minute.
Yeah.
But I was kind of a hooligan growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I ran with some crazy guys. I was co-founder of a local gang.
Oh, wow.
I got kicked out of high school and had to go to continuation. In the particular neighborhood I grew up in was predominantly Hispanic. So, and as you can see from the picture, I don't look Hispanic, but I identify. That's where I grew up. That's my my calle, my streets. So I thought my standing joke is that I thought I was Hispanic till I was 18, and somebody said, "No, dude, you're a galacho. You're a white boy." And I was like, "What? What about all the menudo, the pozole, the chorizo? Bien." And so I kind of grew up in that realm. I was on a path. I was on that line where you could fall on either side.
Mm-hmm.
Running with the people I was running with, and I kind of decided that it's time to put up or shut up, grow up.
Sure.
So I went in the military. I went in on a buddy system with two other guys. That in and of itself is kind of a funny story. I won't bore you guys here, but to make a long story short, I was supposed to have gone in the Army with these two guys, and we were going to be paratroopers, and we ended up in the Air Force as K-9 cops. Two of us, K-9 cops. The other guy went into air traffic control, I believe it was. But so I did my stint in the military, 4 years. Got out. I kind of always wanted to be a copper. I mean, growing up it was kind of like the crowd I was running with. We weren't really pro police, but there was an influential sheriff's deputy, LA County Sheriff's deputy, that taught a course in my high school that kind of made the focal come on a little bit, made me think a little bit about stuff, and kind of made the intrigue real. So it was always in the back of my mind, and so going into the Air Force and military, being a K-9 handler with the security police was kind of the beginning. And when I got out, I decided, this sounds like a good path to follow. So I got out of the Air Force and I applied. Somebody had said, "Hey, just apply for like a whole bunch of agencies.
Yeah.
Even if you don't want to be at one, if you get picked up, you can lateral over to the one you want." So I put in for like 5 different agencies at the same time. I grew up in the county area of Whittier. So Whittier PD was probably at the top of my list, and LA County Sheriffs and LAPD. And then, but my heathenism, even though I had turned a corner, kind of caught up with me, and I took a polygraph for Whittier PD, and I didn't know anything about polygraphs, and nobody told me, hey man, all they want you, they don't care, they just want the truth out of you, that's all. And but I my thought process was like, where else do you go and apply for a job and tell them what a turd you are? You put your best foot forward. So again, I'm hooked up to this machine, but I got to put my best foot forward. I can't tell them what a little heathen I was. And so the polygrapher literally stopped in the middle of the polygraph test for Whittier, and he said, dude, you're going to catch my machine on fire. So there's no sense continuing because the deceit thing is off the hook, and
Right.
And so and the unbeknownst to me, when you apply for multi agencies, to save costs, they share all this information. So next thing I know, once I failed that polygraph, I was getting letters from all these other agencies. Sorry. And so I kind of thought my bubbles burst until a kid I grew up with, a guy named Randy Stover, was working at Pomona. And he said, dude, come out here. And I didn't even know where Pomona was, where I grew up. It was kind of this sheltered little life. I didn't know where Pomona was, but he kind of reinstilled that the bug in me. And so and this time, I had the heads up, dude, just tell them, about your true past. So anyways, I got, to make a long story short, I got hired by Pomona in 1980. I was actually in the stages of putting myself through the Rio Honda Police Academy when Pomona picked me up out of the academy. And so that started the journey. I overcame some obstacles that I created for myself. They talk about white privilege, but I didn't get that memo. The way I grew up, I missed the memo. It's like,
right.
I didn't reap the benefits of anything. So, but I did overcome. Got hired. Did my little stint. I think I was on the department not even 2 full years when I was asked if I wanted to go to the Major Crimes Task Force. I jumped at the chance. I thought I was pretty green to be going that young, but I was also older because I'd done my stint in the Air Force, and so when I got into the police department, I was already 26, so I had a little maturity going for me. So anyway,
Danny, what was it like working for Pomona when you first started patrol and town?
Let me just. I think I can encapsulate it best by when I started at Pomona. Well, before I started at Pomona, I literally got hired by Pomona and San Bernardino County Sheriffs simultaneously, and I asked, respectively from both agencies, hey, can I go on a ride along and just see, and then I'll make my choice. And so they were very gracious, both of them. So the first weekend I went with San Bernardino County Sheriffs, and it was on a Saturday night, and it was in the Ontario, the west end of San Bernardino County. And I think on the Saturday night, we handled like a barking dog call the entire night. And I'm like, oh God, this is exciting. Everybody at that age, it's all about the excitement. So the next weekend, I went out with Pomona, and it's going to sound like I'm embellishing, but I promise you I'm not. So back in those days, I went on this ride along with the guy named Raul Camargo, rest in peace, who later on became my godfather when I converted to Catholicism, and another guy. And so we're walking out the back door of our station to walk out to the car to begin our shift in the ride along. And we start taking sniper fire from across the street. As you guys both know, the station sits on the corner of Park and Mission. And so Park, the north-south street, Mission, east-west street. And so across Park Avenue, we started taking sniper fire. And that was before they had the metal gates that you guys are used to. That was probably what prompted those gates, is because it wasn't uncommon. Our police department, as you guys again know, is on the edge of a well-known gang in Pomona. So that started out the evening, taking rounds. Our very first call was a homicide over in 12th Street area, this gang area, and it just went downhill from there. From there, there were 906s, which for your followers, that's an officer needs help type calls all night long. And I said, oh man, I got to come to work here. This place is popping. So it got so bad that that night that the watch commander tried to call me in from this ride along. I said, listen, for liability purposes, we got to send you home. It's too busy tonight. And I said, listen, if I'm going to come to work here, I want to see it at its peak. So I talked him into it, and he said, okay, you can stay, but we're going to switch you over and put you in a car over in the far west area called Phillips Ranch. And but as you both of you know, there's no beat integrity on a night like that. So even though I was in Phillips Ranch, we were all over the city. So that led me to that's my story of how things were in the early days of the coming to work for Pomona. And I'm told it was even crazier. If you can envision, it was even crazier than that before I came on board in the late 70s. But when I came on board in 80, yeah, it was popping. To make the
what's interesting. What's interesting about that, Danny, is I kind of see that. Obviously, we super busy city, and some would argue that back then, which I think definitely has some truth to it, that it was a lot more busier than it is now. But as a watch commander now, I see ride-alongs that come in, and I talk to them when they come in and when they leave, and they said, "Man, you guys, this was such a busy day for you guys. You guys had shootings and stabbings and robberies." And my response is like, "No, it wasn't a busy day. It's a Thursday night. It's a Thursday. That's what we call a Thursday here in Pomona. It isn't busy. It's just Thursday."
Yeah,
so
we call it Thursday.
Yeah, we call it Thursday, a typical day here. So my sentiments to that, I definitely love that. So I'm kind of curious, Dan. You've had an incredibly diverse career, from Pomona PD, retiring, working LAPD, and then you've worked some federal disaster response. What experiences or experiences help shape your perspective the most, you think?
I went into, because of the way I grew up, and being pretty much not fond of the police. When I finally turned the corner and decided, I kind of bought into well, if you don't like it, change it, join it, change it. And so when I came on the job, I was bound and determined not to become cynical. And both of you guys know, and a lot of the myths about law enforcement and how cliquish we are and how we just stay together, and a lot of that stuff is based on truth. Sure. And off duty, you only hang out with other cops and stuff like that. Well, that's true. So I was keenly aware of those types of things for law enforcement, and I was also just as aware that I wanted to try my best not to fall into that. So I really enjoyed, I wanted to become involved in the community. I did a lot of stuff with at-risk kids. And I just focused on, not becoming cynical. The world isn't like this. This is only a small portion of the world. And I maintained that attitude throughout my career. And I think obviously it was tested, that, my philosophy was tested time and time again.
Sure.
And I'd be a liar if I said, cynicism didn't creep into my reality at times. But I had to push back. I had to push back for me, for my family. I had to, do it for my own mental health. And, before we go any further, I just want to tell you, I mean, how important I think this topic is, how important I think your podcast is, and how unique. I'm not a real podcast follower, but I'm aware of podcasts.
Sure.
I'm pretty much aware of what people are interested in, and everybody's excited about war stories and stuff like that. But the only people that are really interested in the mental health aspects are the grunts, man, the boots on the ground.
Absolutely.
And when you talk about the military experience and the law enforcement experience, they're very similar. The primary difference is that law enforcement doesn't spread out over 30 years, and military in a lot of cases does it. They shove all that post-traumatic stress syndrome into a couple of years combined. Sure. So, but they're both there. They're both real, and not to get off topic. So, I had to not fall into any of the stereotypes of law enforcement. I had to make myself aware of what pitfalls cops get into and how to avoid them.
Sure.
And so I came in with a mental attitude. I have a great supportive family. I have a great relationship with God. I wouldn't consider myself a Bible thumper, but he's my homeboy, and we get along well. And he's bailed me out of a lot of situations. So, it's just you just have to remain focused, and you have to know that there's not only good and evil on the civilian side. There's good and evil on the blue side, but our evil's different. It's not evil that is evil for the sake of personal gain. Like you do have the aberrational copper that goes out there and does dirt for his own personal gain, but most of it is guys that are trying to do good, but they get so fed up with the system and the cynicism that they look for ways to cut corners to achieve the goal that they're after. So they're not the same. They're the same, but they're not the same.
Right.
And so I hope I confused you enough where I didn't answer your question. So.
No, you did. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Dan, so you definitely cut your teeth working gangs. You did an amazing job from several stories I've heard, and then you went on to Homicide. I'd like to fast forward just a little bit to one of the cases we prefaced in the intro. So for those that aren't aware, in 1996, correct, Danny?
Yes.
One of our officers, Daniel Fraembs, was murdered on a humane way. And I want Dan to tell us about that. Dan was involved in the case from an investigator standpoint, investigating and also being the main liaison between the sheriff's office. Dan, can you start off kind of working backwards? You weren't there when this happened because it was on patrol. But if you could fast forward from everything you learned from your investigation and years later, start off your story tonight with what happened that night with Daniel Fraembs' murder, and then segue into when you got the call that night and your role from there.
So when you work Homicide, basically we rotate being on call for Homicide because we're a smaller agency. We're like, at that particular time, we were on call for Homicide every other week. In this particular case, I had a routine of when I would get called out. And as you both know, especially back in those days, the city was busy. We were averaging anywhere from 35 to 40 murders a year. And we had basically 2 homicide teams. So later fluctuated to 3 teams and back to 2 teams, but we were swamped. So there was this routine, especially when this particular watch commander was on duty and a homicide happened in the city, and it was at off duty hours, late at night, 2-3 in the morning. and I get the call from this particular watch commander, and he was not jovial, but he was just, he had a standard line, Kono, get a clean pair of underwear on, pack your lunch, kiss Mrs. Kono goodbye. We've got homicide for you, and that's the way it started. He was a great lieutenant, a great person, and that's the way all my call outs started from him when he was the watch commander. So May 11th, 1996. It's actually Mother's Day. I get a call from this lieutenant, and he was very solemn and cut right to the chase. I remember it like it was yesterday. He says, "Are you on call?" I said, "Yes." He said, "We've got an officer down." I said, "Who is it?" And he said, "Danny Fraembs." And so I didn't ask, what's his condition? I didn't ask, is he alive or dead? The conversation ended right there. And, I was up. It was about 2 a.m. when I got the call. And I was up and off. So I remember very distinctly pulling into the rear of the station to get gas. As you both know, our gas pumps are at the rear of the station. I pulled in to gas up, and I see an officer going in the back door from the gas pumps inside. I don't remember who it was, but I asked him, "How's Danny?" And his response was, "He's 10-7. And 10-7 is a police code for out of service, which in this case means he was dead. And, we're a smaller agency. We all know each other. I attended a gang conference with Danny, so I had a little bit of insight into what he was about, who he was, and he almost instantly had my respect on the way he approached the business. Low key, very humble, and he had all the background to be a superstar, to be somebody that, if he was of that mind, he could really promote himself. He was, I believe, an 8th or 9th degree black belt. His backstory, as most of you know, was that he was born in China. His parents, or whoever at the time, had abandoned him at a beach and partially covered him with sand and left him there to die. And a passing policeman, ironically, heard his cries and rescued him. And he was put in an orphanage. He was adopted by a couple named Donald and Dorothy Fraembs, adopted with another young lady out of this orphanage, Dara Fraembs, brought back to the States and raised as their own. He was only months old at the time. So as part of his upbringing, they raised him back in Cincinnati, Ohio. He joined the United States Marine Corps, served honorably to the rank of sergeant, got out, became a deputy sheriff with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, stayed there, working their jails for a couple of years, wanted to get out of the jails, and came over to Pomona and had been with us for 4 or 5 years when this incident happened. Excuse me. But he was well liked. Like I said, he was a totally humble person. He wouldn't share any of that stuff unless it somehow came out. It wasn't like he, walked around bragging about any of that stuff, especially his backstory. But once you got to know him, he was just like the typical, atypical, humble. He was everything you want by the Kono standard of a police officer. Low key, easygoing, cared about the community, cared about the department, and he had honor. So when I heard getting back to the station, I was gassing up, and I hear he's 10-7. It was like it was like a more vicious punch in the stomach than I had ever taken physically on the job. Just knocked the wind out of my sails, and my mind was just spinning. And but instantly, we've got jobs to do, and it doesn't stop there. And you can't let emotion dictate how you're going to handle your business. So I met up with my partner, Greg Collins, at the station. We rolled out to the scene, which was on Humane Way, just north of Mission Boulevard. And for those that aren't familiar with the area, it's an isolated area. It's called Humane Way because there's a dog pound that occupies probably half of that street. And above that, there's a hill on the backside of this dog pound. And at the top of the hill is our police range, where we go to qualify, as you both know, and do a lot of police training. So this particular incident happened probably about 100 yards north of Mission Boulevard on Humane Way on the west side of the street. And so taking you back a little bit before our arrival and what we learned, because first off, let me preface it by saying anytime there's an officer involved shooting where there are hits, and in this case, this was a fatal officer involved shooting, because we're so small for transparency purposes, and we bring in the LA County sheriffs to handle the case so that there can never be a question of bias, for that very reason. We know the guy, we're affected emotionally by what happened. So that's the protocol. So the sheriffs take the lead, but on the other hand, the liaison, the Pomona PD homicide liaison, which was Greg and I, the sheriffs can come in, but they don't know our city, they don't know our gangs, they don't know anything, they don't know Danny. So they're taking the lead, and they have a great deal of resources. But behind the scenes, we are as much involved as they are. So, and maybe more so, just because we know the streets, we know the players. So, but again, obviously for transparency and for to keep bias out of it, they take the lead. So it was several hours before they would get out there. So we obviously got out there. Greg and I got out there long before they did. And what we had learned was that Danny had gone out. He was on patrol, single person unit, and he spotted 2 males and a female Hispanic that appeared to be gang members in this isolated area at 1:30 in the morning on Mother's Day. Danny went to make contact with them, and he basically illuminated them with the spotlight of his police car. The female turned out to be the girlfriend of one of the guys, and she later turned out to be our key witness in the case. And we learned through our investigation that one of the 2 individuals had a .45 caliber pistol on him at the time, and the other 2, when Danny lit them up with the spotlight, the other 2 told this guy to run. He was also on parole, and they said run, because they said they knew that our tactics are that we're not going to run past the other 2 individuals and leave them to our back. We're not going to chase them. So they knowing that are telling this guy, run. He's not going to chase you, run. And in a very guttural voice, he said no. And basically, he's telling them he's not going to run. He's going to take this cop on. So Danny illuminates them. Danny's he's very officer safety savvy, but he also made some mistakes, and he'd be the first one to tell you, I made some mistakes. So he detains the three of them. He has two of them, our shooter, and I won't even mention his name. Just call him the shooter. But he and his girlfriend, Danny, had them sit on the curb. He calls the other individual over to him on the driver's side of the police car. So Danny is, when he sees them, he's traveling southbound on Humane Way. So being the driver, he's got the car in between him and these three individuals. So he calls one of the individuals over to him, and he basically starts to pat him down. So one of the mistakes that Danny made is that he didn't tell anybody he was out checking, which is that's normal protocol when you go out on somebody, especially being a one-person unit. You
Sure.
let dispatch know you're going out to check somebody. Danny didn't, and in my mind, part of it, we'll never know, but I thought I have the feeling that Danny was so confident of his abilities, so confident of his background and his officer safety that he just didn't feel the need. I mean, here's this martial arts expert, this Marine, and he's dialed in. And under normal circumstances, he'd be 100% correct. And he's probably done it dozens of times like this, but this one caught up with him and cost him. So he's checking one individual, brings him back around the front of his police car to the driver's side. Actually near the hood of the car, near the left front tire, patting him down. And in the interim, our shooter is chipping. Chipping is basically talking crap to Danny. Why are you screwing with this? Why are you messing with us? We're not doing nothing. Leave us alone. And he's got a game plan. The shooter's got a game plan that began with the distraction. And he's talking to Danny, and he's already got his moves, decided in his head. So as he's talking crap, and Danny, is not getting rattled at all. This happens all the time, and so Danny continues while monitoring them. And now our shooter stands up, and he kind of, when he stands up, he pulls his girlfriend up onto her feet. And he kind of stands behind her, and he drapes one of his arms around her, almost like a rear carotid. But in this case, he's just doing it like he's hugging her. He's talking crap, and he's got his left hand draped around her, and he starts nudging her forward while he's talking crap, and he's nudging her forward several feet, and then when he gets to where he wants to be, with his other hand reaching down into his front waistband, he withdraws this 45 pistol. He kind of grabs her by the shoulder and pulls her out of the way, comes up with the pistol, and basically shoots Danny in the face. Danny, he had a chance to unsnap his holster. There were some reports that said he didn't even get his holster unsnapped. He did. But obviously the bullet was catastrophic, striking him in the face, and exited in the back of his head. Danny goes to the ground, and the shooter immediately turns to his girlfriend, screws the gun in her face, and says, "Are you going to tell anybody?" or words to that effect. She's terrified. No, I'm not. I don't see anything. I don't know anything. I didn't hear anything. Then they take off running. She kind of hesitates before she runs off. Her statement was that Danny went down on his back and was reaching out to her, asking for help. This injury was so catastrophic that the coroner said that basically he was dead before he hit the ground. But he may very well have been extending his arms, what they call posturing when you have a head wound. And so there may have been something like that, but he didn't ask for help. He was done. but that was her interpretation of his movements. So she eventually takes off. The troops, they don't know. They don't know this has happened. And there is a passerby, a young woman that drove past him northbound on Humane Way from Mission. She sees the black and white there with nobody around it. As she drives past it, she sees Danny down on the ground. She continues northbound. Humane Way dead ends into Holt Avenue. And if you drive straight across the intersection, there's a Shell gas station right on the corner there. She pulls into the gas station and she goes to the payphone and she dials 911. And somewhere I have a copy of the tape of her call and the response of the units. And I just couldn't find it. It's buried somewhere. I couldn't find it for this podcast, but it's just, to listen to it is just overwhelming. So he's basically calling dispatch and saying, and she's very distraught. She's talking about, listen, there's a black and white police car and there's a policeman down on the ground, and you need to send somebody right now. Well, dispatch, you kind of hear in their voice, they get a lot of crank calls, and you can tell by the response, their first thought is, well, we don't have anybody who put themselves out, so I doubt this is probably just another crank call. But I think eventually they realized because of her, she was so distraught, that there might be something to this. So they dispatch units to the location, and in the meantime, we have I don't know if you'd call it a protocol or whatever. When we have an officer that isn't answering his radio, as both of you know, I don't know if they do them still, but they used to do time checks where they would have every officer respond on the radio so they would know he's okay. So they call it a time check. And they started this time check, and in the meantime, they dispatched 2 or 3 units to Humane Way. And you hear the first unit get there. He gets there. He's putting out on the radio, "We have our unit here." And as he's pulling up close, you can hear him say on the radio, "It's Fraembs." And he immediately starts putting out, "Pomona, it's Fraembs. Do you have him here? Did he put out any broadcasts?" And this officer obviously is very, very distraught himself. So the world comes, everybody responds. Supervising Sergeant Dale LaFleur is the sergeant on scene. He's running the scene basically, and obviously he knows Danny, and he's as distraught as anybody. But again, he has things to do, so he starts setting up a perimeter. They ultimately catch one of the individuals that was being patted down. He ran northbound. There's an old abandoned incinerator with a huge smokestack that you guys may remember. I'm sure you remember, but it's got this, 50-foot, 75-foot smokestack over there, and it's been abandoned for several years. And for whatever reason, this individual, and I'd say it's another 75 yards north of where this happened, and this individual decided to bed down there instead of just continuing to run. He just bedded down. And our shooter and the female, they went southbound into a tract of homes, and for the moment, they got away. So Dale sets up this perimeter. They start searching the area. They find the one individual hiding, but he's not giving up anything. So he's denying. He just said, "I was drunk. I fell asleep." So fast forwarding somewhat. Well, it's important when Collins and I get out there. We get out there basically at the tail end when they've broken down this perimeter. They have the other guy in custody, and the first thing I see when I get there is obviously Danny's down. He's on his back. He's covered with a one of the disposable blankets we carry, or it might have been from the fire department. And I see Danny there, and maybe 25 feet away, sitting on the curb, is LaFleur, and he's sitting on the curb. He's spent. I can't think of a better word. He is absolutely drained emotionally, physically, and you guys know that after the adrenaline starts to subside a little bit, then the reality kicks in, and Dale was just looked like he was in shock. But I mean, he did his job. If not for Dale, he started the ball rolling, secured the scene, caught this other guy. They searched everywhere, secured evidence. But then once the dust was settling, then everything started kicking in for Dale. So I just had this vision of Dale sitting there on the curb, and small agencies were one family, one family, one fight. So I had my job to do, but I went over there and I sat down next to Dale, and we both sat there not saying a word. And I just put my arm around him, and we cried like babies. And that lasted for a couple of minutes, and it was back to work. So eventually the sheriffs got there. They started doing their thing, and we started providing them with information. The guy that was caught bedded down by this incinerator was from a particular gang in the area. So we filled them in on him. But some of this I just think was like divine intervention. Our shooter, as he was running away, back in those days we carried pagers, and he dropped his pager. So that was a huge piece of evidence. The FBI, back in those days, there was always kind of this animosity between federal law enforcement and local law enforcement. But it's kind of like the fire department, there's this fake animosity. But when push comes to shove and the crap hits the fan, we're all brothers. We're all in this together. We can bag on those guys, but don't let a civilian talk crap about federal law enforcement or firemen or whatever, because we're one big family. And they stepped up, and they used a lot of their resources almost immediately. Got the owner, or identified the owner of the pager. And in the interim, before we had keyed in, I mean, the fingers were starting to develop a direction toward our shooter. But the big break came from the girlfriend. And she was just like, even though she was a person that wasn't actually a gang member, but she was enamored by that lifestyle, and so she hooked up with him and loved the gang lifestyle and the bad boy image. But she still had a pretty big heart, for life. So she went home. She made it home, very distraught. Told her parents what had happened, and her parents, they're kind of old school. They basically said, let's go talk to our family priest for guidance. And very devout religious people, Catholics. So they went to their parishioner, their parishioner priest, and told him what had happened. Well, as you guys know, there's certain protections that people can't come forward, privileged communications that people can't come to law enforcement and disclose. One of them is a parishioner and a priest. Another is a doctor, patient, confidentiality privilege, husband, wife. I may be missing one or two, but the big one, one of the big ones, is the parishioner priest. So he's bound by law that he can't disclose. He can't come to law enforcement and disclose this information. But to his credit, he basically absolved her and told her she could and encouraged her and said, I'll go with you. And so this priest is just like, I've never heard of it happening before. I'm sure it has, but I've never heard of it. And I've never heard of it happening since. But he basically brought her to law enforcement, to the sheriff's department, and just gave it up, told exactly what happened, identified the shooter, the pager, came back to the shooter, and things just rolled from there. And he had fled to Arizona, but within a week or so, he was in custody for the crime. Went to trial, was convicted, and was put up on death row until politics took the death row away. So that's where he sits now. So that's the short, long narrative.
Well, it's intense when you.
That's
Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
intense. No, I was going to say definitely intense. I had an opportunity to speak to a couple of the patrol officers very recently that were there that night. And like Dan said, one thing that struck out to me was, the radio broadcast went out, officer down, possible officer down in the area. And the two officers that I talked to, they said everybody that was rolling with red lights and siren, they had no idea they had to be a Pomona cop. They were thinking it was either, like Dan said, a false call, an outside agency, or right across the street, there was a security guard group for General Dynamics. Most of them assumed they were talking about a security guard, maybe asleep. So when I talked to these guys, they rolled up, just the shock of seeing a Pomona police car in the middle of the street with the light bars on. They walk up and they see their friend on his back with a bullet. Danny, correct me if I'm wrong, right above his cheek. I also heard the radio traffic and the officers that rolled up. It was just horrific to hear. I know all the officers well that were there on the scene as well. You couldn't even understand or recognize their voice because their octave, when they were putting out 998, officer down, it was just, it didn't sound like them. So I can't even imagine the emotional turmoil. So Dan, my question to you is, not only how did you deal with that aftermath, but what was the temperature of the water at the station when you saw other cops? How somber was it? How did they get back into action? Not just that night, but a week after, a month after. How do you think they mitigated that back in the day? Because officer wellness wasn't a thing like it is today.
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I think a lot of people internalized it because, like you said, it wasn't 96. It wasn't popular. If you were in an officer involved shooting and you shot, then there was protocol set up where you would go and see a psychologist and talk to them, even back in those days. And, but there was nothing in place, nothing prepared us for the loss of a brother. And, again, a smaller agency back then, I want to say we were 168 sworn. Everybody knows everybody, at least one time or another is broken bread with almost everybody in the department. And this is kind of a scenario, although I would never portend that it's as bad or as serious as those that are in the military and see combat that lose multiple brothers. But this is kind of the example of those, they suffer in a couple of years, a couple of deployments. Our suffering is spread out over 30 years. And it's no less, it's no less ass kicking. I remember, when I first got there, even before I sat down with Dale, one of my lasting memories is that when they lifted this disposable blanket off of Danny, I think it was the coroner when they got there, and I don't know why. I would probably have to go see a psychologist and find out why. but I didn't see Danny. I saw, it was like looking at a mannequin, but all I could see was a Pomona police uniform. And that's just one of my lasting memories. It wasn't like I saw this guy that I know, one of my brothers. I saw the uniform, and I couldn't take my eyes off that Pomona police patch. And like I said, to this day, I don't know why, but that it just that's the image that's burned in my head right now. I don't, I see peripherally, I see a guy laying with a gunshot wound in his face. I see a huge pool of blood, but that Pomona police patch and badge and uniform, it haunts me. It just haunts me. It just, I don't know, but
Unreal.
so, and it was just like, depression. I mean, it was like department-wide depression. People went out and you wouldn't really know it. You felt it. Emotionally, you felt it, but you wouldn't know it to look at these guys and gals. They went out there, they humped, they did their jobs. They continued to, be hated and spit on and disrespected on the streets, and they continued to act like professionals. There were some officers that were testing the waters about how can we retaliate against this particular gang, and but they had to be reeled back in. But that's the reality of it. They're no less human, and they have human thoughts. But because they're professionals, they probably are more quickly able to get them under control. But there were people that were interested in just retaliating. And I don't mean going through the neighborhood doing drive-bys, but just bringing the hammer down. And to be quite honest with you, I mean, this particular gang, once we identified the gang and as is customary, I don't know about customary, but the heat was going to come down on this gang. So there was zero tolerance enforcement. There was, a lot of enforcement. We were assisted by other agencies, but we worked our way through it. I mean, as far as how we felt, how we were affected by it, the loss of a friend, what people did on their own time when they took the uniform off. I imagine some of them, when they probably
took to the bottle a bit.
Yeah, maybe. But we were hurting. We were just in pain, and the general stance was, it can never be rectified, because ultimately,
Sure,
the person that did this was caught and convicted, but that's just one guy. He's instantly replaced by 10 other little turds, and he hit the jackpot, and he took out a piece of the blue line. So we had to come to grips with that. There's no equity. They took one of ours, and one of theirs goes down for it, but that's not equal. There's a piece of society, a piece of garbage from society that's put in the trash can, but that person, took away a valuable community member, a protector of innocent people, and so it's just, you get into the philosophical end of it, and
Sure.
it's like, so yeah, it was a tough time during that time frame, and a lot of emotions.
Yeah, and one of the things that Ryan said that kind of really stuck out with me, because we talk about the mental health aspect and the wellness within our department, and I've seen both. Ryan and I've seen both. You probably you probably not so much, Dan, with respect to the fact that now wellness is such a big thing for us. We have peer support, we have employee assistance programs. I mean, we have all kinds of stuff. You could see the Counseling Team International anytime you need. It's always available there. We have a facility dog that goes through the station through work groups, and you can pet it. It's supposed to, put you in a good mood, so to speak. Those things that we have now didn't exist when you were a cop. They didn't exist 20 years ago when I started, or 25 years ago when Ryan started. But they exist now. So when you say that people were depressed and we were suffering, but everybody was suffering together, I imagine how much exponentially harder. I guess I can't measure sadness, but I can imagine that you didn't have the resources then that at the disposal that we have now. So that suffering that people that went through probably lasted a little bit longer, or maybe was even more severe than now, because we have so many resources. So my hat's off to a lot of you that went through these times and just didn't have those resources, because at that point it was still seen as taboo, even a weakness. If you can't handle your emotions, then you're weak. It goes back to the military and all kinds of things. And now that's shifted. We don't see that much anymore. And now we encourage our cops to evaluate their mental health and make sure that everything is okay up here before you get into black and white and go 10-8. And we see the difference now in the type of cops that what that does to our police officers. So there's definitely been a big shift with respect to mental health. And again, why we started this podcast almost, you didn't see law enforcement podcasts 20 years ago. It didn't exist. No such thing existed, but now here we are talking about these things. And it's important because people like yourself that lived through those times, that a lot of cops like myself looked up to as a young cop. We always wondered what did mental health for you look like, and that's going to segue into my next question. Dan, you worked a lot of these high profile cases, the Eldridge case, Danny Fraembs. The one that really sticks out of my mind, because it was right around the time I started, was the Ethan Esparza case. How did these things, if they did, how did they affect you personally? And what type of things did you do to cope with them and make it out of Pomona, in retirement, and go on into other things in life? Like, how were you able to cope? How did it affect you, and how were you able to cope with it?
Well, interestingly enough, I think I made it out, but I'm still not sure. As time goes by and I get older and older, sometimes some of these things in my later years seem to become more prominent than they were at the time they happened. So it's kind of strange. I did make it out. I did. I applaud anybody that's completed a whole career, because like both a lot of people don't. A lot of I don't know what the statistics are, but as far as how many people make a full career versus how many don't for whatever reason, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people just they're not cut out for it. But those that did, it doesn't even mean that they were cut out for it. It just means that they did it and they found a way to do it. And that doesn't mean that whatever got them through that full career isn't starting to crumble later on.
Sure.
And I'm not talking about myself. I was a whack job before I started, and I'm a whack job now. So, but I think going in, I would have to take it all the way back to the beginning And as soon as I got out on my own, and
Oh yeah, your audio's muted, Danny.
how's that?
Yeah, perfect.
So that's all I have to say about that. That's the end of the story. No, so I have to roll back and look at how I came in and recognize it at the beginning. Once if you wait well into your career and you wait until these things, you see these things and they affect you, and you say, I gotta make a change. It's hurting me. Sometimes by then it's too late. But if you go in right from the beginning and you say, listen, I know these things happen. I've seen Jaime's podcast. I've listened to the stories of these guys that what they've gone through, both military and cops. And if they listen to what the product that you're selling, if they look at it and they listen to it and they take it to heart, and some guys that are watching this or listening to this, they've already been around a while, and they're saying, "Oh man, can I relate to that? Oh yeah, I remember when I lost a brother officer." And a lot of people watch this from a perspective of been there, done that.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other people out there, I'm hoping, that are watching this, looking at it, listening to it, that are saying, "Hey man, here's a resource. Jaime's created a resource that is going to help me get through it. So why do I have to wait? Why should I wait till I see some kid that's been run over by a car and mangled, laying in the street, crying for his mom, and I as a cop see this, and I'm thinking of my own son that age, and I'm relating that. Why do I have to wait for that? Why can't I know that's going to happen? And why can't I, it's still going to affect me. If you're human, it's going to affect you. But I think that the preparedness for I wouldn't say, well, it is bad things, but the preparedness has to start early, man. It just has to, you have to say, listen, look at all these people, listen to what they have to say,
Right.
Take it to heart, take what you can get out of it, throw the rest away, but prepare yourself. Just say, I'm not going to become cynical, because I set a goal. I had a marker, and my marker was, if I reach this point where I become this cynical, I'm bailing. I'm out. I quit. I'll find something else. I always wanted to be a long haul truck driver. That was my backup plan. I'll go do that. But if I ever hit that point where I just hate everybody and everything's bad and everybody hates the cops and the cops hate everybody, then I'm leaving, man. It's just, you have to keep, that has to be the ring, and you have to keep your eye on the ring and stay true to the ring. And just like, have a benchmark where you gotta, when I hit that benchmark, it's time to crap or get off the pot. So that's how I dealt with it. I kind of I departmentalized things. I had a distinct separation between the job and home, and I tried not to. There were like two different worlds for me, literally, not just philosophically, but literally, they were almost like two different worlds. And I tried not to let my law enforcement life world bleed into my personal life, and vice versa, not to become too, where I brought in all my other stuff and bring it to the job. And I remember back in the day pushing the black and white, and when I was off duty, I wasn't hanging around with cops. There were a lot of cops I loved and respected, but I needed that peace, that space. I needed to hang around with regular people to stay in touch with non-law enforcement thought processes and stuff. And my circle was tight, but I needed not to immerse myself into law enforcement 24/7. I needed to have that separation. And so this world over here, my civilian life, when I was a civilian, I was a civilian. And when I was getting ready to go out on the streets, it was weird. I felt when I was one of the guys that didn't dress in the locker room because I didn't want to spend any more time there than absolutely necessary. So I would dress at home, get in my blue suit at home, put on my little cool Hawaiian shirt, and drive into work, throw my gun belt on, and then it began. But when I was home and I'm putting on that blue suit, and I put on that my armor, my vest underneath, I felt like I was a gladiator getting ready to go into an arena. I mean, my teeth, I could feel my jaws getting tighter. I could feel like a change, changing from my happy-go-lucky, taking my kids to Little League and taking my wife for a date night to becoming a gladiator and being prepared for. There are people out there that want to hurt you. They want to kill you.
Absolutely.
And so you have to get yourself right for that. You have to get yourself prepared, but not so much that you hate everything. It's a thin blue line in many ways that you have to walk, and to keep your humanity, but to stay on top of things so that you don't get hurt or get somebody else hurt. So I just, I had a good, it's a lot of people aren't blessed to have the stable and life at home. I've got a great wife, as you read in the bio, 43 years, that grandkids, kids, and I focused on keeping those two separate. My wife and that life is my sanctuary, and when things were bad over here in this world and I crossed that line, that was my sanctuary. That was my recovery, my healing, and then I would go right back in. And I'd be a liar if I said none of it affected me, and I'm not cynical, and that I don't have 5 screws loose instead of only 4, because it's gonna, as long as you're human, stuff out there is going to affect you no matter what you do. But it's up to you how much it affects you and what you do about it. People can give you the tools, but they can't make you use the tools. The old, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Sure.
But so
I love one of the things you said, and it's something that I frequently preach, and I've mentioned on this podcast, I think, time and time again. One of the things you said is that you have friends that aren't cops. I think that's really strong to be a successful police officer, because when you have nothing but cop friends and you immerse yourself in cop life, when you're with cop friends, all you do is talk cop shit. You talk war stories and all this type of stuff. You kind of lose your sense of reality to some type of normalcy, if you will. And I remember vividly years ago, when I was a brand new cop, and I loved looking like a cop off duty, and the high and tights and the white shirts, and I remember when I was with my civilian friends, some of them who I still have to this day. I remember one time we were sitting at one of their houses, and I was talking about a foot pursuit that I got in, and how I apprehended the suspect, and it was an arrest. And I remember how jazzed up I was, and I was only a year or two cop at the time, and they were looking at me as if like I was some type of an alien or something. Like the story I was telling them, it wasn't that type of response I would expect from telling a fellow police officer. They were like, "Oh, hell yeah," and good job. They were like, I don't know, what do you want me to tell you? Like, it's, I guess, like, it's good for doing your job. So it didn't have the same effect telling them that it did telling a police officer. And I realized to myself, like, all right, this helps me be grounded, and I always remember that the rest of my career. And now that I'm 2/3 of the way done with my career, I frequently preach that to a lot of our younger officers, that hey, it's great to hang out with cops, and it's great to go have dinner and beers, but it's also great to have civilian friends too. Like they kind of bring you down a notch, if you will, and kind of keep you balanced in the sense of reality that you'll lose by just immersing yourself in law enforcement all the time. So I love that you said that, and obviously having a strong support base is crucial to being a successful police officer. In 43 years of marriage, that's that's certainly a feat. Guys go through this career with 2-3 marriages. I could start with the A's to the Z's and tell you how many cops I know that are on, paying child support or on their second or third marriage. So to have a marriage for 43 years in this type of profession, dealing with all the trauma and the mental health, it's really unique. You don't see it that often anymore. So to hear that, it's great to know that you found some type of balance. And I know that you have faith as well. You talked about that at the beginning of the podcast. I'm sure that probably had something to do with the fact that you made it out of this career still, sane, if you will. So I kind of want to ask you, Danny, looking back on your career, is there any advice that you would give younger officers that are either entering the field or are currently in the field that you would give them so that they could have a successful career, so they could make it to that 30-year mark? What would you tell them? And maybe something that you would have done differently if you could have.
Well, there was a training officer that had a saying that he imparted on me that I maintained, and it's kind of funny in a way, but in a way it's not. And he had a motto, and he said, "Remember this always." He said, "Never lie unless the truth will get you fired." And that's so profound, and but you can really philosophically, you can take that so many directions, not only on the job and doing stuff and enforcing the law, but you can apply that to just life. Don't lie to yourself, unless the truth will hurt you dramatically, and just it's hard for me to impart what I would consider my own wisdom, because the game has changed so much. Law enforcement has changed so much. And it's almost like raising kids and like raising a family, and you as a kid, when you were young and your parents told you a certain, imparted some wisdom on you, and it's like, oh yeah, right, you old people. And then as you progressed, as you got older, and then finally you reached their age, it's like, holy crap, they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And it's a cycle. Then you try and impart it on your kids, and they're telling you the same thing. Hey, you're old, you don't know what you're talking about. But law enforcement has changed so much. And when I got into law enforcement, we were saying amongst ourselves, I cannot believe we're making this much money. Or I should say, I cannot believe we're getting paid to have this much fun. It's like, we would do this for free. It's just mind-boggling. But I don't know that the new breed, I don't know how much they have that. I don't know how much they look at this profession as a career versus a job. That's the tough thing. It seemed to me when I was getting ready to leave the job, I saw a transition from those that had that, I can't believe I'm getting paid to have this much fun, to this is a job. And, it's not it's a job. I don't want to work overtime. I got a date. I want to work 8 to 5 and push the black and white, but I don't want to do, I don't want to work overtime. I saw that transition, and it bothered me a lot. It was one of those dinosaurs, but reality is reality, and I'm not quite sure where it's at today. I mean, I keep my finger in the pie, and on the pulse and the temperature, whatever. I'm still working with LAPD, so I still get to see the cops and see their mentality and see new cops versus old cops, and but I just think it's important to have a better idea of what to expect. Most coppers that don't make their full career and don't go out on injury, those that either go out on stress or they change careers because they just don't like it. It's been my experience, it's usually not the streets. It's usually internal. It's usually the, and I hope you're taking notes here, Ryan, because I know you're brass over there. So it's usually the internal political climate, and nothing's changed on where I'm at with LAPD. It's the same thing. It's not the streets. That's the streets, and all that stress and your shootings and all that other stuff and dead bodies is almost temporary compared to the internal politics and the internal bullshit, if you will, that takes its toll, that shortens a person's career. It just says it's not worth it. So expect it, and just enroll with it. If that's my biggest piece of advice is stay balanced. You used the word balance a few minutes ago, and I'm a huge believer in balance in life. We were talking back about friends and cop friends versus civilian friends. Man, I get the cop friend mentality. They're the only ones that understand me. They're the only ones that have been in that foxhole. And again, you can extend this to military or whatever. They're the only ones that have been through it, so they get me. I'm not saying don't do that at all. I'm just saying stay balanced. Right. Have friends that don't understand that. Like you said, when you're telling them about that foot pursuit or whatever, and they look at you like you're a Martian, that's okay. You just got to know your audience. Okay. I don't have to, I share that with my other friends. That doesn't mean I cut back on my civilian friends. That just means I have two different sets of friends. So to me, if you just go in with your eyes wide open, the toughest years mentally that are really going to form you, I always say, are like your first 5 years. Right. A cop, because you got to prove to your other cops that you got balls and you're in it to win it, and we're all on the same team, and that's those first 5 years are like that's when you're cutting your teeth, and after that reality starts to kick in, and then you start to spread your wings a little bit more, and you start calming down a little bit and closing the mouth and opening the ears a little bit more. But if you can know and understand that you're going to go through a transformation, everybody does it. It's just a matter of, is it 5 years for you? Is it going to be 4 because you're the exception? It's going to be 6. It's going to happen. I don't care. It's just in that you're going to have that part of your career. You're going to have this part of your career, and you're going to continue on down the road until you reach the ripe old, years where you're the most wise, like you two are. But if you can, right from the beginning, if you can understand that's going to happen, and if you can, approach the job accordingly, these first 5 years, man, I got to get through these first 5. These are the first 5 where, yes, I have to impress the fellas and let them know I'm down for the cause. But I also gotta work in that communication and that respect for the community, and it's going to save you a lot of heartache if you're not prepared for that. If you're going into it kind of closed-minded, or then I think it's gonna have more of an adverse impact on you when those shifts actually happen, when those changes happen. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know. But if you start, podcasts like this, if you listen, open your mind and get ready for it, or at least know it can happen. I don't know that you can be ready for it. Just at least know it's there. So it won't be such a shock to the system when it happens, and it'll be an easier transformation. I don't know if any of that made sense, but damn, this whiskey's good.
No, it made perfect sense. Well spoken. And as we kind of begin to wrap it up, we're at the 1.5 hour mark. Ryan, do you have any other questions for Dan?
Yeah, Dan, just closing it up. I mean, you've had an impressive long career, many facets with LAPD and the military and gangs and homicide. If you could pick one thing that you would say is your legacy? Something that Danny Kono left behind, something that Danny Kono left just a little bit better with law enforcement. What do you think that would be?
I know what I would like it to be. I would like it to be how I treated. I was pretty notorious for being an Adam Henry to my peers. I was pretty hard on the guys. You know, I was pretty notorious coming out of homicides and homicide scenes and getting on the blue suits about, hey, don't be throwing your cigarette butts in my scene or spitting your sunflower seeds. And I was kind of, you know, not hard on them, but I was firm and direct. My soft spot was the families of victims and civilians. And even to this day, like when I do this LAPD job, it's like, I kind of, not consciously, but it kind of fall back to when I was a heathen and I didn't like the cops. And I kind of think about the one cop that was teaching this class in my high school that kind of made the light come on a little bit in his approach to us heathens. And I thought, damn, it resonated. And if I resonated with one cop or one person and made them, treat somebody on the streets a little differently, then I'm happy. I just, I wasn't, nobody will ever tell you that, oh, Kono was like the greatest in the world history of solving homicides, because I wasn't. I was probably below average. But what I'd like to think is, I'd be hard to beat on how I treated those people that lost somebody and how I treated, those that we serve. That sounds corny, but that's, if I had a legacy, I take a lot of pride in that I made the extra effort. I went out and I didn't talk the talk about, doing stuff with that at-risk youth. I went out there and tried to do something, So I feel good about that I at least tried. I don't know what kind of impact I had or if I had any impact, but I can rest with that on the job that I was good to, for the most part, I was good to the community. I was good to the people that I was supposed to serve, and probably a little tougher on the guys that I worked with, but they get me.
Awesome.
Wow. Ryan, any closing words?
It's been a pleasure, Dan. Growing up as a police explorer, I had a little taste into your world in the 90s, late 90s. And like we talked about, you and the other cops back then were just cut from a different cloth, the way they process things. I don't want to say work ethic. When I was a watch commander, so I worked special details for a good amount of years. There's a bunch of new cops. And like any cop that is off the streets for a while, I'm like, who are these new cops? They don't know how to do law enforcement. But I've told this to Jaime is when I came back as a watch commander and I got to know a lot of the new cops. Just Dan, to give you some hope, we have some really good hard chargers still out there doing a great job. So that's very, very promising. They do a great job out there, but still cut from a different cloth. They process things differently. They're motivated differently. We as managers, the police department, we need to motivate them differently to get out and do the job. But I don't think it's any different than back when I was on the streets or you were on the streets. We were cut from a different cloth than people were the generation before us. But just interesting, Dan, to see your perspective on things. You've seen things that people would not see in 2 lifetimes. The murder you've seen, Daniel Fraembs, Ethan Esparza, who we didn't cover, but was a baby that got killed in a drive-by that Danny had the displeasure of having to investigate. But thank you for being here. Definitely opened my eyes, and very proud to be your friend. Thanks, and I hope we talk soon.
I appreciate that. And if I could, just in ending, I have a picture that I couldn't find that the video that I was, or not the video, but the cassette tape of the Danny Fraembs case. But I did come across this picture about this picture that we took of myself and two other fantastic homicide cops that they just kind of, it says it all, just the looks on their faces in this picture. And, you know, it just says it all. You can see the dedication. You can see the caring and empathy that these guys had. And so if I could just hold this up so you guys can see that.
I know those guys. I'm related to one of them. That is awesome. Alan Maxwell and Hector Rodriguez.
That's right. A couple of the best cops and homicide cops that ever strapped on a gun. So
yeah,
thanks for doing this, you guys. I mean,
I'll just throw this up here. I'm not sure where this came from.
another great guy.
But I did find that, and I found this one.
I hadn't seen some of these.
There's great guys there. Oh my God.
Oh, that's funny.
And that's what kept you sane right through the 30 years is a good
100%. 100% sense of humor. Keep your sense of humor. Never lose it.
That's great. Well, in closing, Dan, one of the things that you said as you were closing, you said by your standards that you were below a homicide detective.
Wrong.
And I think by you saying that, it really just is a testament to like your personality, that you're just a very humble type of person. Legacies and legends, they never see themselves as like a legend. Because they're humble and they're modest people. You know, growing up in the department, to me, you were seen as like that legendary homicide detective. And people in my peers that knew you, we saw you as that, because as I was coming in, you were toward the end of your career, and we had worked together for just a few years before you retired, and I was still a young cop. And to show you the impact, that you had on a young cop, I dug through my paperwork and I found this letter of appreciation that the command staff wrote me, but it was on your behalf, that you probably don't even remember. It was in 2008, and you wrote it. It was a case that you were working involving a gentleman named Carlos Duro. It was a stabbing incident. Again, you probably don't remember because you worked so many, but you had actually wrote this to me as a young police officer that was given to me by our command staff. And there's a sticky note from Rob Baker, who was, again, retired years ago, but it says, "On behalf of the homicide unit, thank you." And this was given to me, but it was written through you. And the one thing that you said was, your report was, the note says here, the most important part about this is your report was later reviewed by senior homicide investigator Dan Kono, who had been assigned the case for follow-up. Investigator Kono was so impressed with your efforts, he wrote, "His report was one of the best I have read." So, as a young cop coming from someone like yourself, that's a very seasoned veteran homicide investigator, I remembered this my entire career, and I kept this letter of appreciation that was written in 2008, just shy of, some 20 years ago. And that's always the person that I've seen you as, is that type of homicide investigator, that the type that sets the bar, the one that, dresses the part and knows what he's doing and plays the part. So I'm grateful, honestly, to have worked with somebody like yourself. It makes me feel like an old school cop a little bit, because I was there when you worked there in that time period. I'm grateful to have you come on here and share your stories, all the stuff you've done, the traumatic stuff you've been through, again, in a time where, mental health wasn't in the forefront as it is today. And to see you make it through the career and then go on and do stuff afterward, it's promising. It's promising for people that are in retirement now, that are suffering from stuff. And it's promising for our cops that are here now, that people like Ryan and myself want to see make it through their careers and be successful when they leave, and deal with whatever issues that they have. So to come here and hear your stories and hear some of the coping things you've done, and I'm so grateful to have someone like yourself come on, and we're really beside ourselves. So I appreciate it, and thank you for always being that cop that someone like myself looked up to. Even 20 years in my career, I still think of you as a legendary police officer, even though you don't think of that as yourself. But someone like myself has always thought that in my entire career. So thank you very much, for coming on and sharing your story, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Cheers to you. Yeah. Kind of raise our glass and just cheers to cheers to Dan.
Cheers, Dan. Thank you.
Appreciate you. As we close up, we want everybody to remember every story shared on Whiskey and War Stories is a reminder that strength isn't just about surviving. It's about speaking up, breaking the silence, and finding connections in the chaos. If you felt the weight of your own war stories, know this, that you're really not alone. There's power in vulnerability, and healing starts with conversations. Thanks for listening. If this episode moved you, share it, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. We're on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube because these stories really deserve to be heard. Stay grounded, and keep telling your stories. We'll always be here, Whiskey and War Stories in hand, ready to listen. Thank you both. Season 3, Episode 3 with Danny Kono. Thank you very much. See you, boys.
See you next time.